Sameer Kashyap. He is going to be talking about simple state management with Riverpod. I think it's pretty simple. Let's just have Kashyap Sameer here and let's talk to him.
Hi, Digvijay.
Hi, Sameer. A very good morning to you.
Thank you for this
How are you
opportunity.
doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Wonderful, wonderful to know. So as I'm good. Thank you so much. It's a little cold here. I think my jacket would give that away, but yeah, apart from that, we're golden. Um, so as a quick introduction for Sameer, he is a final year engineering student in computer sciences, and he holds a deep passion for technology. Um, he has been contributing to the open source, especially to Flutter, with the goal to help the student community grow. And he is also the lead for the Google Developer Students Club in your
Yeah,
college,
yeah,
and has also recently got selected as an MLH fellow for the spring cohort. Um, so Sameer, I think I'd let you take away the stage, and let's tell everybody what you have to say.
yeah. Sure. Thank you so much.
All the best.
I'll be sharing my screen. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Samir. I'm from Bangalore, and I'll be talking about state management with Riverpod today. Just share my screen. So hope my screen is visible. Okay. Let's get started. So yeah. So if you aren't already aware of state, if you're new to Flutter, and if you don't know what state is actually, let me put it in a few simple terms. So state is like a middleman between your data and your UI. So the way it should be architected, your app should be architected, is that the state drives the UI and not the data. So if you're new to Flutter, you usually use set state and then used all of your business logic within the widget tree, but that would not be recommended for larger apps because it will just get all fuzzy and you won't know what is happening in your app actually. So it's always best recommendation to move your state to another separate layer, which will act as a middle layer between your data and your UI. So in simple terms, your UI is a function of state, which means that as the state reacts, the UI builds, and that's you can see it so good in Flutter. So if you're really new to state management, I would recommend checking out Provider, which is the official recommended package by the Flutter team. But Provider has some issues. And let's first take a look at the state of state management. So so how would you actually accomplish this state management solution? Well, there are more than 50 plus packages in Flutter. If you go to pub.dev and search, you'll get more than 50 plus. And here are some of the most popular ones. And it's been even a hot debate in the Flutter community where people are arguing which is the best one to follow. But as the Flutter team suggests, Provider is the best one to get started with if you're a beginner, and you have rest of the options which you can pick and choose according to your taste. And obviously I've stuck with Provider, and then since Provider has a few issues and the same author came out with another package called Riverpod, I've moved on to that, and I find it really simple to manage state with Riverpod. So let's take a look at what are the problems with Provider. So if you've used Provider, this is the biggest headache that you will always have. As a beginner, I struggled with this so much. Every time you try to listen to a provider, you'll get this error that provider of type not found, which means that the provider is not above the widget tree, as an ancestor of the widget tree. So this is the most common runtime error, and you need to always keep, and you'll only know this once you run the app. So it's a big time constraint and really slows down your development. And then this was one of the complaints that provider didn't provide for. Providers of same type could not be given, as you had to put all of your provider in the top of your widget tree. So any provider, if it was the same type, so suppose in this case it's a string, so every time you would refer to this provider, you would only be referring to one of these and not both. You can't access both of them. And then this was one of the more bigger problems. When it comes to complex apps, you would want to dispose state from within another page or another other widget, but this was not possible in Provider. And every time you would try to do this, you would get a runtime error saying this. And then one more problem was that it depended on Flutter. You needed build context to always read a provider or listen to a provider. You couldn't do it in a simple Dart package. So provider almost got, so when Remy did release Riverpod, he was searching for a name, and my answer almost got accepted because I tweeted at him to asking him to call it the Apple ecosystem because all of his packages work so well together. And I would recommend the same if you're using any of Remy Rosellet's package. Just use all of what he has done. They just work, integrate so well with each other. And he even declared me the winner, but unfortunately that didn't go well, and it was called Riverpod again. So let's take a look at Riverpod. Like, how is it different, and what are the upgrades, and what are the problems it solves that provided didn't do? So, uh, Riverpod, Riverpod uses the features that provider lack for. So it is compile safe. Like I told, once your program compiles, you won't get any runtime errors. So if you have made an error, you'll always get it at compile time and not runtime. And it's Flutter independent, so you can finally use it in only Dart packages. You can combine multiple providers. As you can do with streams, this was not possible with the normal provider package, like with streams. But now you can finally do it. And then you can even dispose providers that you're no longer listening to, like the dispose feature I mentioned below. And finally, you can have providers of the same type. So let's get started with the basics. So if you go on pub.dev and search for Riverpod, there'll be three results that showing up. So you might be confused as to which one to go with. So here's a basic clue. So if you're only using just Dart code, you can use just the package Riverpod. And if you want to use it with Flutter, you can use Flutter Riverpod. And there's one more special package called Hooks Riverpod. So Flutter Hooks is again by the same author and builds upon the same concept of React hooks. So if you're familiar with React, Flutter Hooks is more simpler than React hooks and completely eliminates your stateful widget logic by replacing it with a hook widget. And you'll see more of that code later on. So this is how you would create a provider. Getting started, so providers are global, meaning that they're global variables, but that doesn't mean they're actually global. They're inserted into the widget tree at runtime, but you declare it as global variables, and you can declare it anywhere in your project. So this is how you would create a simple provider. So a provider is just something that gives a reference to an instance of a class. So to create just a provider which you won't listen to changes for, you can just create it by doing the first line, final repo provider equals repository. So this is a most common use case where you have a repository of API calls where you want to just reference the API calls in your state. And then you can even create providers of a single type like int. So here I have a stream provider which will yield 42. And then you can even create a provider of which you can listen to states. So if you're familiar with change notifier, state notifier is an upgrade over that and builds upon the value listenable builder. So after creating your provider and before you start consuming it, you have to make sure that your root of the visit tray is wrapped with the provider scope. Without this, you can't create your providers. And this is what enables you to insert your provider at that particular time so that you don't get those runtime errors. So Riverpod provides a lot of flexibilities to consumer provider. So the first one would be a consumer widget. So if you've used provider package, you'll be very familiar with this. So a consumer widget, you can wrap only the part of your widget tree where you're listening to changes and wrap it with a consumer. And this gives a parameter called watch. So watch is where you insert your counter provider which you created earlier. So you just reference that counter provider or the variable, the final variable that you created, and then you listen to the state, and this will return the most famous counter app example. So here you can listen to the state of the counter, and as it increments, the state will change. So another way to do the same thing is by extending a consumer widget instead of a stateless or a stateful widget. So again, this will give another parameter in the build method called watch. So again, you can do the same thing as above and watch for the provider, and then listen to it in the widget tree. And then there's a special way called, like I told, using the Flutter hooks package. So you can use hook widget, and then you can use provider as a hook to listen to that provider state. And I prefer this the most simplest way because this helps us completely eliminate stateful widgets and the boilerplate that comes with it. So let me show you a quick example of how simple it is to manage state with Riverpod and how easily you can build a to-do app in 5 simple steps. So first, while building a to-do app, create your data class. So anytime we build any app, we always make sure to create our entity classes. And this is my data class. So it has three simple parameters: ID, description, and if the state of the to do, if it's completed or not. So the second step would be to create a controller class. So this is a class that comes with the Riverpod package, and it is the most recommended way to manage state. It's called the state modifier class. So this will be where your state logic lies. So it's simple. It's simple to use. Just extend the class with state modifier instead of what you did with change notifier, and then you put the type of state, and then you have to override the state in by calling super, and you can pass in the initial state there. So the third step would be to add the state logic, the business logic. So here I have three simple methods. So add, toggle, and remove. So these would be the most basic things in a to-do app, where I'm adding a to-do or toggling it completed or incompleted, and then removing the to-do completely. So you can see the logic here. Adding a to-do is just one line. So all you have to do is deserialize the state using the spread operator, and then add the new to-do onto it. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that state in state modifier is immutable. So you can't assign the same object again to it, and the state won't rebuild if you do that. So always have to make sure that state is a clone or a copy or a new object of what you're already doing. So that's why always make sure to call chain an operation or spread it in a new list. You can see I'm doing that all over the place. So here I'm calling to list, here I'm spreading the list, and here I am again calling to list, so that there's a new object and the state rebuilds. And then the final step would be to create your provider, just like I showed. So to creating a provider is simple as calling final to this provider, a global variable, calling state notifier provider, and the class which your controller class, which is the to do notifier in this case. And I'm passing an initial state of empty list in this case. And one more feature which I mentioned was listening to a provider inside another provider, and which is what I'm doing right here. So you can see that I'm watching the above provider inside the second provider, so that I get only the completed to-dos in this list. And since this is only a provider, it even though it is just a provider which doesn't have any listening state, it will still rebuild once this provider changes. And then finally you consume it in your widget tree. So that is simple too. Like I showed, you just use a hook widget or a consumer widget, and then you just watch or use provider to listen to the state. Like as you can see, I'm doing the same thing here. So I'm just calling to-dos and listening to the state of to-do provider, which will give me all the list of to-dos in my state. And the same thing for completed to-dos. And then I'm just spreading it over a list view and showing the to-do items. So let's see how this turned out, right? Let's see what's the result of this. So I've structured my project in MVVM fashion. So you can see this is my state, whatever the state controller class I showed, this logic of that. So here I'm extending the state notifier, and I'm passing in a list of to-dos, and to-do here is my data class. And I have all the methods that I previously showed. Okay, so this is the initial state I'm passing. You can see inside this provider, I'm passing the sample to-dos. So that's why you're getting two initial states, initial to-dos in the state. So let me just show you a demo of the app. As you can see, that you can easily manage your state. And once I do completed this part, the completed to-dos will rebuild and it will come here. And if I just undo it, and it will go away. So this is how simple it is to achieve a simple to-do app and to manipulate adding, removing, and toggling states and modifying the states. So you can see it can be done in either one line or 3 lines at maximum. So you can even edit this, and the state will rebuild. So you can see now it became by dog. And then one more trick that I didn't show is that you can even use search, like you can even do full text search locally in just like 10 lines. So here is a search bar. So every time I do on change, it's building my entire search logic is within my control class. So you can see here, it rebuilds. And all of this and this entire logic was done only in this many lines. So all I'm doing here is calling where and filtering out the search list, and then just assigning it to state. So every time you want to make your state rebuild, all you have to do is assign it to the state variable called state. So you can see it's a getter and setter of the controller class, and and assigning it to it will rebuild the state. And and the last trick I would like to show in this app is how easy it is to also do something as complex as state restoration. So I'm only using this logic to restore my state. So suppose I delete a to do and I can undo it that easily. So all I'm doing is caching the previous state. I'm just assigning the state that was to a previous, like a variable. And then once I click on reset, I'm just checking if it was not null and assigning it back to state. So all it takes is like 3-4 lines to do logic as state restoration. So this was a simple list of to-dos, but what if you have more complex state, right? So what if you have 2, 3, 4 lists of to-dos? So that is also very simple and elegant with Riverpod and state modifier. So all you have to do is create, of the way I like to do it is use freeze and create a sealed union. So this way, this is what will keep track of the states. So you can consider these as the 3 states that we'll have in my app. So usually any app will have a loading, a loaded, or an error state. So this is what I'm doing here. And the logic becomes just a slightly bit different. And I'm using a local database here called Symbas where I'm caching the values. So I'm just getting the to-dos from DB, and once I find a list of to-dos, I just set the state to to-do state.loaded. So this sets the state and shows the data on the screen. So let me just demo this quickly. So if your state was that complex, all you have to do is instead of just calling to-dos.map, you would have to listen to your state each of the classes. So here I have a loading state, I have a loaded state. So in each of those cases, what would I want my visit tree to look like? So in loading, I would want a circular progress indicator, and then in loaded, I would want it to show the actual data. And then in empty, I would just want to show the add to panel, so I can add new data to it. Right? So let me just show that. Yeah, you can see that these were the datas in the database. So it loaded and it is showing the new datas. So this works the same way. So instead of listening to 2 providers, I'm just putting both of them in the same state. So you can see here, instead of creating 2 different providers where I was showing completed and then all the to-dos. So in this case, I'm just putting the to-dos list and the completed list in one single state. So each one of them will rebuild, and the logic is just a tiny bit different. So every time I add a new to-do, I just add it to the current state, and then this is where the logic changes, because every time I click on a to-do, it should complete. So here I check which of the to-dos are completed, and then I add it. The C will be the second parameter, which is the completed to-dos, and it works here as well, as you can see. So this was the state management with Riverpod. So this is how simple it is, and I would really recommend trying it out. So compared to other state management solutions like Block or Mobex, which have a lot of boilerplate code generation, Riverpod has nothing, and you can just manage your simple states in 1 or 2 lines. And that's it from my side. Thank you. And if you want to get the project, do scan this code. And I'll be available. You can follow me on GitHub and LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm very active there, and I would love to connect with you all. Thank you.